Riley, we have a problem.
Yeah,
Do
what's
you know
that
what that
problem?
problem is?
No, I do not. What's the problem?
We have some astronauts stuck in space, and they literally cannot come home at all for at least another year.
Um, I mean that is definitely a problem. First off, how did that happen?
What if I told you it had to do with Boeing and one of their spacecrafts failing?
Then I would say it's another multi-billion-dollar company that's about to be under fire.
Yes. What's crazy is, though, it was only supposed to be an 8-day trip, and now they're stuck there until 2025 because another Boeing aircraft screwed up doing what it's supposed to be doing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, we're going to dive into that. But first, this is episode 28 of the Unscripted Company podcast. For those of you listening, heads up, episode 30 will be live streamed 2 weeks from now. When is now? I don't know. As of right now, it is August 11th. So 2 weeks from that date, we're going to be live streaming over on our Rumble channel. Come check it out. It'll be a fun time. A lot of stuff has gone down since you and I last spoke last week. We have another big political story, which I'll save for the water cooler. We have a vice president nominee, something that we didn't have last time we spoke that we can kind of dive into. But as always, how's your week been?
It was good. Just work wise. Again, it was just another slow week. I've been taking, obviously classes on all the forums and the updates and stuff and contracts and everything. And obviously at the sake of, for the sake of not boring any of our potential viewers, it is a lot of legal stuff. It is a lot of things. I'm not a lawyer, but I have to know all these forms. So it's been I don't want to say awkward as far as like how it's been going, but the changes don't officially start until August 17th, but our brokerage in particular is wanting us to start going ahead and using the new forms. So anytime I meet with someone and they want to go see a property, I give them an update. I'm like, hey, by the way, there's gonna be a couple forms I'm gonna have to go over with you when we get to the house. And it's kind of awkward in the beginning, but I'd rather get the awkwardness out of the way. Like, hey, like, we have to do this. It's not just us. And I've had a couple people so far not think that, it was something that they had to do, but I showed them, some proof from some of our showing services that are like, hey, you have to do this. So, but I just let people know, like, hey, like, it's just for a week, like, consider this my job interview. Like, the first time we meet is my job interview. If you want to work with me, then we'll sit down and we'll discuss everything else. But as it stands now, this is what every realtor is going to have to start doing. So, um,
Let me
it's
ask you this. So I know a lot of people that listen to this show are around our age, give or take 10 years or so. And a lot of those individuals, I imagine, may be potentially in the market for a single family home or looking at some property. From your experience, do you have like one piece of advice to give someone who may be tiptoeing into the real estate market as a buyer or potentially a seller? Do you have any words of wisdom from kind of what you've gathered being, you know, on the ground?
um, well, from just experience, like, I've heard people say what some of their experiences are with other realtors. My advice is like, yeah, you want someone that's fun, that makes the process fun, but you also want someone that's going to explain things out to you, especially for a first time home buyer. People around our age that are probably just now buying their first home, you want to make sure that you're working with someone that's explaining everything out to you. Make sure that they have, maybe even like I do a buyer's console. Like, I have a folder that has a whole plethora of just documents in it, it goes through the whole process. Everything that I would tell you, you're going to find in that document. And so just, find someone that you mesh with, find someone that you feel like you can trust. And I understand, like, you're talking with someone that's going to represent you that you probably never met before, unless you have a family member. But it's just one of those, things where don't be afraid to shop around, but just keep in mind though that we're not doing this to punish you. Believe me, we don't like doing it as much as y'all probably don't like signing an unknown document. But I explain the document out to people, tell them like, hey, this is just to get you in the door. And then if you want to sit down and actually talk about some things, then we'll meet up for coffee. We'll sit down and we'll hash it all out. And if you choose to sign with me, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. Like, I want to make sure that they're at least understanding of what's happening, what's going on. So
No, that's really good advice. Just to wrap up that thought, if you want to chill out, like, do you want people to reach out to you if they're in the Dallas Fort Worth market?
I mean, yeah, like, I mean, I'll even if you've never, like, even if you've bought a home before, but it's been so long, like, you know, or you're just like maybe wanting to look and see what the market is like, or you have any questions about what the market is like, things like that. I mean, hit me up. You know, I mean, I've got social media. You know, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook. Um, and I mean, match the face with the picture. I mean, obviously you can see my name down there in the corner. So I mean, obviously it's one of those. But you know, just reach out to me. I mean, I'll even meet up for coffee and just sit down and just talk for a bit. You know, I mean, I do put out some content. I've been bad about social media, man. It's almost a full-time job all on its own. Um, but no, I mean, that's just the gig. I mean, you know, I want to make sure that people know and understand, because the market is very weird right now, like 100%. And it's been weird since I've been in it. You know, it's a buyer's market right now, but with it being an election year, a lot of people are very hesitant because they're unsure about what the future holds, which happens every election year, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. I
No,
was thinking through. I'm like, man, you really do, in a sense, you know, run your own business. So give you an opportunity to chill out. You know, if anyone wants to inquire about, you know, real estate services, Riley's your guy. Check him out.
for sure, man, for sure. But yeah, other than that, though, I mean, had my 4-year anniversary, so that was nice. That was fun. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you. We went out to dinner. To Capitol Grill. Very, if you ever get a chance to go to Capitol Grill, there's 3 locations in the DFW area. We went to the one in Dallas, and it was very good.
Did you get
Very,
yourself a
very.
nice steak?
I got a 14-ounce.
That's a lot of
Uh,
ounces, sir.
Dude, I know. I got a 14-ounce ribeye, boneless ribeye, and I think it was like a garbanzo crusted ribeye. So it was like a cheese crusted ribeye with like a wine reduction sauce. Dude, it was delicious. Like it was, and obviously we had our sides and stuff like that. But then they obviously provided the free dessert for our anniversary. On top of, they also gave us 2 glasses of champagne on the house as well for our anniversary. So like that was very kind of them. So Capitol
Nice.
Grill, you took care of us. You did us right. We appreciate you, and I highly recommend.
Nice. I always respect when restaurants they go out of their way to give you a little bit something extra when they know it's
Right,
like an anniversary, a birthday,
right,
whatever that might be. And it wasn't just like, oh yeah, here's a free scoop of ice cream. It's like, no, here's 2 nice glasses of champagne or whatever they might
right. What
hand
about
out
you?
to you.
How was your week?
Man, it's been pretty interesting. So I never really talk about it on the podcast, but I work for a company called Rumble. Shout out if you're watching this on Rumble, first of all. But it's been an interesting week in the news when it comes to advertising.
Mm-hmm.
So haven't really talked about it too much on this podcast. Maybe you've seen it on Twitter or X, the talk around this, but there's a big cabal that's basically been found out, discovered within the advertising industry, where you have these advertisers that have come together and they have a steering committee. And I'm doing a poor job probably explaining this, but basically you have a group of advertisers that have created a cabal, and they have dictated where advertising dollars can be spent based on certain codes of ethics. So if you're a company and you want advertisers to work with you, you have to check the boxes of X, Y, and Z. Similar things happen with publicly listed companies on the
Mm-hmm.
stock market. So if you want to receive certain types of funding, you have to meet DE&I requirements. You have to meet certain status quotas, things like that. Long story short, this information has come to light within the advertising industry. And both X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, and Rumble have kind of joined together in a lawsuit against this organization. And so they'll have their day in court. They're also going against Google as well, because Google has a role in this whole situation. I don't want to overspeak. There's plenty of news articles out there. If you want to Google GARM, GARM, you can read into this whole cabal. A lot of it's being spearheaded by Diageo, which is the beer and wine liquor
Mm-hmm.
superpower out there. They own almost every liquor brand you've probably ever heard of. It's very interesting though. And so Rumble's CEO has been very vocal on this alongside Elon Musk. He was on Fox News this past week. He's been on a bunch of other news podcasts, live streaming, talking about it. Can't talk about too much just because Rumble is a publicly traded company. X is a private company, but there are shareholders involved there behind the scenes. It's just very interesting. It's been a very interesting
Right.
week in terms of you go from a point where you're like, okay, you see something's wrong with the system and you feel like nothing can be done about it. But then once you have two superpowers like Rumble and X come together and create a giant court case about this, it really seems like there is some hope. There's some
Right.
light at the end of the tunnel with this. So it's just been very interesting, at least from my perspective, seeing it kind of behind the curtain. I know nothing that the public doesn't know. I only know what you see in the news story, so I don't really know any secrets or anything. But if you look up Chris Pavlovski on
Mm-hmm.
X, the CEO of Rumble, he has a lot of really good posts that really kind of lay out what's going on there. But
So for just to kind of paint a picture, like, okay, so you say like two superpowers. How big is Rumble? Like realistically, like, I mean, minus like the amount of users that it has, but like the company in general.
it's quite large, but when you look at it compared to other behemoths, like it's difficult to compare it to YouTube because YouTube is backed by Google and Google's backed by Alphabet. So there's literally a war chest of money, and they're the incumbents. So they've
Right.
already taken the market share to begin with, whereas the alternatives are trying to chip away at that. And they're doing a pretty darn effectively good job at doing that. But it's hard. It's a David versus Goliath, but
Right.
David wins that story, So it's one of those situations where it's like, yeah, you are going up against Goliath, but if you use your slingshot effectively and you have allies such as Elon Musk, who
It has
knows?
like pretty much infinite resources. I mean, he really
Yeah.
does. Like,
And the other crazy thing too is that one of the bigger court cases is going down in Texas. So it's actually going to be in a Texas courtroom, a federal court, I believe. I want to say out of San Antonio. I'm about to fact check myself on some of this. But one other thing that came out of this was Google lost a lawsuit showing that they are practicing monopolistic practices, such as like being able to say that. Hang on, let me look this up real quick because let's see. Google loses court case, and I'll share my screen so we can all see this together. Yeah, it has to do with Google's search intent and how the types of resources and sources that they show you whenever you search on Google. I
so
don't know
it's
if,
like, so is that like the steering thing you were talking about? Like, it's like you search one thing, but for example, for just to kind of, you know, break it down for people. So just a good example, because this is something that I saw recently in this last week, is if you were to search Donald Trump rallies, it wouldn't bring up Donald Trump rallies. It would bring up stuff about Kamala Harris. Like, you'd see one article about a Donald Trump rally, but everything else would be Kamala Harris. Like, they're pushing and they're like hiding information from people about what's going on with the election and trying to push the agendas of the opposite side. That's just what I've seen. I'm not the only one who's seen that. There have been people that have seen it, people who are willing to admit that they've seen it, not people who are, Democrats that are on that side who are like, oh no, like that, like no, you can plain as day see that Google's like hiding information from people.
exactly. So this is actually just from CNN Business. This is from this past week. It says Google has violated U.S. antitrust law with its search business. A federal judge ruled on Monday, handing the tech giant a staggering court defeat with the potential. Ooh, pop-up message. Love that.
Potential nightcaps.
Right?
Yeah.
With the potential to reshape how millions of Americans get information online and to upend decades of dominance. Quote, after having carefully considered and weighed the witness testimony and evidence, the court reaches the following conclusion. Google is a monopolist, and it has acted as one to maintain its monopoly, end quote, from a U.S. District Judge, Amit Mehta, wrote in Monday's opinion, quote, it has violated Section 2 of the Sherman Act, end quote. Says the decision by the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia is a stunning rebuke of Google's oldest and most important business. The company has spent tens of billions of dollars on exclusive contracts to secure a dominant position as the world's default search provider on smartphones and web browsers. Those contracts have given the scale to block out would-be rivals such as Microsoft's Bing and DuckDuckGo. The U.S. government alleged in a historic antitrust lawsuit filed during the Trump administration. Now, said Meta, who's the judge, the powerful position has led to anti-competitive behavior that must be stopped. And the article goes on to talk about the exclusivity that Google has acquired over the years. But I mean, think about it. When you open most web browsers, Google's going to be the default search engine for you. Your phone, even if you're on iPhone, like an Apple product, or Android, which is of course owned by Google, Google's going to be the default for a lot of things, such as YouTube being the default for a lot of video content that you see out there.
Right. Yeah.
So this was kind of the first big blow, proving in a court of law that yes, Google is in fact a monopoly. Now, I feel like this is going to be like an onion, to where this is just one layer of the onion. Like, how deep does this onion go? I think we'll find that out over the coming months and years, just because some of these court cases take a while. This article in and of itself mentioned how this was a court case that got filed during the Trump administration. So we're almost at the tail end of the first. I mean, we know Biden's not running again at this point, but towards the end of his first administration. So this has been, 4 years in the making, basically.
So can I ask you a question, and not to get off, because we do have some topics we do want to get to tonight. Do you think, like, I'm not saying that this isn't real and this isn't happening, but do you think it's funny how, like, now all of a sudden this is actually making headway right when we're like 3 months from the election?
It's very interesting.
Like, they could have started all this at the beginning of the year or even last year, because I mean, if this was brought up during the Trump administration, like, there was plenty of time for them to bring this up, but they waited, and now I know we say this every single election, but this is a very crucial election. Like, this is a very, very much so important election, so it's like, I just find it funny how they're waiting until now to be like, oh, Google's actually doing all this stuff. Like, look at all this news stuff breaking about it, everyone, and taking everyone's attention off what's really happening.
Exactly. I think it's eerily convenient the way it's going down. It's eerily convenient. One thing just to call this out, because I brought it up just to get the official take on it. So the headline is Rumble CEO joins Musk's advertising antitrust suit going after harmful monopoly. So this says social media platform Rumble joined Elon Musk's X in filing a lawsuit against the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. That's that GARM that I referenced earlier. Alleging the global advertising group is violating antitrust laws by illegally boycotting certain companies and platforms. Rumble CEO and founder Chris Pavlovski said in an appearance on Fox Business Network's The Big Money Show that the World Federation of Advertisers, which created the GARM consortium to serve member advertisers, have improperly used brand safety standards to effectively boycott certain platforms. Quote, once you have a huge consortium that creates a monopoly across all the big ad budgets that dictate the brand safety standard, they then can now discriminate against certain voices on other platforms, Pavlovski said. Quote, if they don't like what some speech might happen on Rumble or X, they can say, we're not going to touch that, which then causes advertising rates to go higher because now they're only accessing a certain portion of the market, and then drives higher prices for their shareholders and their brands, he explained. So it's interesting, kind of going back to what you said, but it's very convenient that we've known this has been going on. Google and advertising firms acting like a monopoly, acting like a mafia, being able to dictate, like you said, the perfect example of when you Googled Donald Trump a couple weeks back, a bunch of Kamala Harris stuff popped up. And like, yes, Kamala Harris is very relevant right now because she is running against Donald Trump for the office of the president. But if you were to search for a specific individual, especially one that's super famous and popular, for both good and bad reasons, such as Donald Trump, you would think the first couple of things that would pop up would be relevant to Donald Trump directly, not his competitor, which happens to sit on the same political side of the aisle as some of these big tech companies that are now being found in a court of law to be a monopoly.
Right. Well, again, I mean, it is what it is at this point, but I definitely want to, not have this as like a main part of the podcast, but just like updates as updates unfold and happen, just so we can, we're obviously not a news related podcast, but in a sense, we deliver, relevant news, or we try to, unless we're talking about just something that's just completely non-relevant to today's time and we're just having a fun time with it. But we try to try to be that voice to people, just to also kind of get that information out there, because some people may not even know about it.
That is very true. I think one thing that a lot of people also aren't aware of from this last week, going back to your point of we're not a news podcast, but some news happened this week also.
Right.
Just to piggyback on this real quick as we close out this water cooler segment and get to the main topics that we had for this week. Have you been seeing the riots and the protests going on in the UK right now?
Dude, I've seen some of them, and the wild thing to me, the wild thing is how people were getting arrested for what they were putting on social media. Like, keep in mind, if so here's the thing. In America, theoretically, I know it goes against the right to free speech and everything, but depending on what you post, like if you post on social media, and I'm not saying this in any way, if you're like, I'm going to go to this airport and do such and such and such, or I'm going to go, poor example for this one, I'm going to go to a Trump rally and such and such and such and such. Like if you say stuff like that, then yeah, the FBI is definitely going to flag you, and you can definitely face some form of charge. Like, at the end of the day, when it comes to free speech, I mean, it's not illegal to like walk up to a police officer and say some very vulgar things. Like, that's not illegal to do, but you'd be surprised how many cops will get butthurt over something like that. I've seen videos where someone will flip off a cop and the cop will turn around and pull them over. And they're like, well, why'd you do that? Well, because they can. And that's just how they feel. Like, let them move on. And then they want to try to ask for their license, pull them over, actually try to dictate an actual traffic stop when there's no traffic stop to be had. The list goes on and on. My point being, though, is the riots that are happening right now are insane over there, because people are saying, like, has like Britain literally like fallen right now? Like, has the UK fallen right now? Because it's intense over there right now. And I'm not saying it's on par with what happened here in like 2020 and 2021, with like,
It's a good point.
With like full like square blocks being like cut off from people. But it's pretty insane over there right now with what's happening.
Yeah. And it's very interesting. So one thing I was going to share just real quick is there's been a few news pieces that have gone quasi-viral on X from the British news. One here, I'm hoping we don't get hit for copyright. We'll find out.
The offence of incitement to racial hatred involves publishing or distributing material which is insulting or abusive, which is intended to or likely to start racial hatred. So if you retweet that, then you're republishing that, and then potentially you're committing that offence. And we do have dedicated police officers who are scouring social media. Their job is to look for this material and then follow up with identification arrests and so forth. So it's a really, really serious. People might think they're not doing anything harmful. They are, and the consequences will be visited upon them.
So if you're in the UK right now, you run the risk of actually being arrested for retweeting, not only just posting, but retweeting something that could be deemed as hate speech or harmful. But what's even more trippy about all of this is I'm going to share one more quick news segment. So at first you're like, okay, I'm an American. I live in the United States. I'm not going to worry about this. But what if they try to extradite an American to bring him over to the UK and then try him for crimes in the UK, even though you're an American citizen?
We will throw the full force of the law at people. And whether you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further afield online, we will come after you.
Talk to me about that, because we have seen some high-profile figures whipping up the hatred. You talked about it in there with the officers, in fact, about this being added to by online commentary. I mean, I'm even thinking of the likes of Elon Musk getting involved. What are you considering when it comes to dealing with people who are whipping up this kind of behaviour from behind a keyboard, maybe in a different country?
Being a keyboard warrior does not make you safe from the law. You can be guilty of offences of incitement, of stirring up racial hatred. There are numerous terrorist offences regarding the sort of publishing of material. All of those offences are in play if people are provoking hatred and violence on the streets, and we will come after those individuals just as we will physically confront on the streets the thugs and the obs who are causing the problems for communities.
So even if you're not in the UK right now, I don't know how much of this is just lip service versus them actually, I don't know if anyone's going to call the bluff on this, but that's wild.
I mean, so just let's break that down real quick. First off, I love the fact that he used the term keyboard warriors, because here's the thing.
I'm a warrior.
Right. I don't, when it comes to like commenting on videos on Facebook, I don't really do it anymore. Like, if I do, I try to do like a constructive comment in a way, like, hey, like, try to think of it like this, like, let's just not spew hatred at people, because that's not what it's about. A lot of the time, if I watch a video and I see nasty comments, or I see people who are just wrong commenting on it, I'm not gonna lie, I'm one of those people, like, I'll type out a whole entire response, get it all out of my system, and then delete the comment. Like, I won't even comment it. Like, I just won't. But there are a lot of people out there who like to hide behind the screen and like to hide behind their keyboards. People who won't actually go out and do anything about what they're saying that they're going to do. As far as them coming to other countries, I'll be honest, I don't want to see it happen, but I'm interested to see if actually someone is actually going to try to test those waters, because what are they going to do? We're protected by our free speech, First Amendment in this country, or should be. Let's be honest here. A lot of things have happened in the past like 4 years that I don't really know what rights we actually still have, if I'm being honest. I'm just saying, I do love our country, but that's just the fact. But it's just interesting to see, though, like, they're actually making bold claims like that. But what's even more interesting is that to my knowledge, not a single political figure in our country, like big scale political figure that actually has the authority to say stuff like on this scale, has rebutted that and saying, like, you're not going to come, like, what are you going to do? Like, you're not going to come and take our people from our country.
That's what gives me a little bit of relief as to, I think it's just lip service, because if they were to seriously try and do that, I feel like someone would step in and be like, what the heck are you doing, guys? No. We're not doing this. Also, I'll be fully honest. I don't know who exactly those people were that were being interviewed. I know they're part of police services, whether it be local. I don't know who they were exactly. It could have been like they were interviewing Joe Schmo, who was the local sheriff in a small Texas county, just the equivalent over there. I don't know. Maybe they're part of the London police force. I don't know, but their opinion may not even have that much weight at the end of the day. One other thing, though, that came up was the official government of the UK, their account basically quote tweeted, but said, think before you post. And then there's this like warning video down here that's very similar to those anti-piracy warnings you used to see before you'd watch a DVD.
Right.
But it's about think before you post, because you never know what kind of, online actions will happen because of what you do. So,
yeah. And again, I mean, it's not like we're going to post anything. We're just out here just talking about this. Like, I'm not going to go post hate stuff. Does it suck with what's happening over there? 100%. Am I saying that we could eventually face the same stuff over here? That is TBD, because again, I haven't seen anyone just for saying certain things. I've never seen anyone get persecuted for it, but again, anything's possible. So this is just your friendly service announcement, your public service announcement to, treat people, kindly online. Not everyone should be disrespected online. Like, be an adult, if you're going to be on there, like, admit when you're wrong. Don't try to attack anyone, and don't shout, derogatory slurs at people and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, I mean, who's that helping? Like, what is that doing realistically? So just be kind,
be kind. Please rewind.
Right.
Well, now that we're about 30 minutes into this episode, we can get to the actual meat and potatoes of what we wanted to talk about. Riley, we got a problem.
We have a problem.
We have some astronauts that are stuck in space that can't get home, and there's currently no plan to get them home. The headline from The Independent via Yahoo News: astronauts stuck in space until next year after 8-day Boeing Starliner mission goes wrong. So 2 astronauts stuck at the International Space Station since early June may not return back to Earth until 2025, according to NASA officials. The space agency has been examining whether the 2 stranded astronauts could come home on board a SpaceX craft instead of the Boeing Starliner's capsule, which has been beset with problems since it launched over 2 months ago. There is lingering uncertainty over the safety of Boeing's capsule, NASA officials said on Wednesday, and the space agency is split over the risk. As a result, chances are increasing that test pilots Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams may have to watch from the space station as their Starliner is cut loose to return to Earth empty. Now, if that happens, NASA would leave behind 2 of 4 astronauts from the next SpaceX taxi flight in late September, with the vacant seats set aside for Wilmore and Williams on the return trip next February. The pair expected to be gone just a week or two when they launched June 5th as Starliner's first crew. NASA is bringing in additional experts to analyze the thruster failures experienced by Boeing Starliner before it docked. At the same time, NASA is looking more closely at SpaceX as a backup. At this point, quote, "We could take either path," said Ken Bowersox, NASA's space operations mission chief. The disagreements over Wilmore and Williams' return to Earth prompted officials to postpone an in-depth readiness review of the Starliner and to delay a SpaceX launch that was planned for Tuesday. The Independent has contacted NASA, Boeing, and SpaceX for comment. Publicly, Boeing has insisted it still stands behind the Starliner.
Of course,
right?
yeah.
Which suffered mechanical issues on its way to docking at the International Space Station on June 6th for what was supposed to be an 8-day mission. Quote, "Boeing remains confident in the Starliner spacecraft and its ability to return safely with crew," the company said in a statement on Friday. Quote, "We continue to support NASA's request for additional testing, data, analysis, and reviews to affirm the spacecraft's safe undocking and landing capabilities. Bringing the astronauts back in a SpaceX capsule would be a major blow to Boeing." And lastly, the June flight was its first crewed mission to the International Space Station on the Starliner, a flagship development from the aerospace giant meant to compete with SpaceX for contracts with NASA. I think we know how this is going to go going forward. Last week, Boeing reported a $125 million loss on the Starliner program, adding to just $1.1 billion in previous losses it has taken on the effort, according to SEC filings. The ability of the Starliner to complete its International Space Station mission could weigh on the fate of the half-dozen contracts it has with NASA for future flights, according to the Journal. The issues with the Starliner add to a season of difficulty for Boeing, which has been under heavy scrutiny amid a series of mechanical issues and whistleblower claims surrounding its commercial aircraft, which we can talk about the whistleblowers here in a bit, because they all seem to be dropping dead. It's very weird. These questions will surely be on the agenda of Robert Kelly Ortberg, who assumes the role of chief executive at Boeing on this past Thursday. Can you imagine, first of all, being an astronaut, getting excited because you're going to be on an 8-day trip to the International Space Station? That sounds great. That sounds like a fun time. Quick trip,
100%.
up there, back. You went to space, you went to the station. That's cool. Now you're going to be stuck there until 2025 at the earliest.
So, first off, when it comes, like, let's unpack a little bit here. That would be amazing. You know, like I if I had the opportunity to even go for just like a day, you know, like a day or two, like I fly up, stay the night or stay like a couple nights, and then, you know, we're back a couple days later. You know, like I'd be cool with that because the experience alone would be magnificent. You know, it'd be insane. How the heck are we still dealing with issues like this when apparently space travel has been a thing, or, you know, so we think, you know, unless the moon landing was faked, you know, we'll talk about that in another episode. But how is it that they're still having issues with stuff like this? And the fact that, you know, they know, like, they're still standing behind, like, oh, our aircraft is perfectly fine, but it's like, obviously it's not, because they're not taking the chance to risk their lives to come back.
That's a great question. I think there are a lot of variables that play into this scenario. I think the easiest scapegoat, or not even a scapegoat, just the easiest explanation is there are a lot of issues at Boeing right now, just as a company. I think they've cut a lot of corners. They've skated by without major controversy for such a long time that they felt invincible. And I think a lot of their past missteps and errors have caught up with them, because we've seen a lot of issues with their commercial aircrafts, just like the planes you get on to go from state to state, country to country. But now we're also seeing it with mission critical type things to where
Right.
you send astronauts up, but you can't get them back. The wild thing about this too is, I don't know if you caught this from the article, because the article doesn't get as dirty as it should with some of the details here, but the Starliner is currently docked at the space station,
Right.
but it's not safe for people to be in it due to some of the mechanical issues at play. So, like, the docking mechanism is currently taken by the Starliner. So it's not like they can just send another one up to immediately dock. They first have to undock this thing and send it back to Earth. Or just, I don't know, do whatever they want with it, shoot it out into space. I don't know what the current protocols are. So if you're these astronauts, you're sitting there and you see the Starliner, you know there's issues with it. And I know they have resources up there, but that can't be a good feeling.
Well, my thing is so there's a possibility. Like they said they're weighing the decisions as we speak, and there's a possibility that they could be returning. It's, I think, was it September? I think is what it said. Like when the next group of people, group of astronauts go up there, and it's like only 2 of them are going to go, and they're going to have 2 spots left open for them to return back. Be that as it may, though, my question is first off, how many resources do you have up there? Because usually when you go up there for certain trips, you only bring enough of what you need on the initial aircraft or spacecraft that you're traveling up there with. No, I could be wrong. I'm not, obviously, I'm not a space traversal astronaut. Like, I don't do all that. So I don't know if they have an excess of, stuff up there, and then they just bring additional just to replenish what's up there as well. Who knows? But can they survive that month and a half? And if that's even the actual case, are they actually going to do what they said they're going to do with that plan, or are they actually going to be stuck up there for the year? Because if they're stuck up there for the year, I don't know how much, food or supplies that they have to actually survive,
Yeah. I did a quick chat GPT, so take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. Not sure if it's even accurate, but we'll take AI at their word right
100%,
now.
yeah.
I just asked, are there emergency supplies on the International Space Station if astronauts get stuck? And it says, yes, the International Space Station is equipped with emergency supplies to support astronauts in the event they get stuck or face an emergency situation. The supplies include a life support system, which can provide oxygen, remove carbon dioxide, regulate temperature, humidity, and ensure a livable environment. Food and water. The space station is stocked with a supply of food and water that can sustain the crew for extended periods. Typically, the station has enough food to last for several months, which was several is technically 3. Is that what? No, a few is 3, is several 5.
Several, I think it's 4 to 5.
Okay. There's also medical supplies, communication systems, fire suppression system. That makes sense. And then redundant systems in cases like mission critical, the power fails, stuff like those, backup generators. So I guess they have supplies, but I don't know. That's
it'd be enough to last them the rest of this year.
And I know astronauts have to go through a lot of training, especially with mental fortitude, to be able to, it's crazy to first think about oh yeah, I'm going to be put on a rocket and sent into space and then safely dock in something that's in our upper atmosphere and just be chill about that. So I imagine they have the mental fortitude to withstand the trials and tribulation of whatever this is. But that's got to be a train wreck just to know mentally, our escape vehicle is not working.
Well,
it's still here.
The thing is, and I could be totally wrong. I'm not an expert on this. I've seen some movies, but take it with a grain of salt. But when they obviously said that they might be stuck up there a year, that's because as our Earth is rotating around the sun for that entire year, we also have that space station that's also within our gravitational pull. So it has to line up with whenever they send the rocket or whatever they send up to space, because it has to intersect each other for it to dock on each other. And that again, if there's any astronauts that might have been watching our podcast while we made complete fools of ourselves talking about space and stuff, please, by all means, correct us. But I don't know. I do hope that, NASA and everyone else makes the right decision to, bring them home instead of just sending 4 astronauts and then leaving 2 up there to bring 2 more back. Bring them back. That would be the smart decision, because here's another thing too. I know that with certain, entities like NASA, they are technically a government regulated entity. Now, not to bring up old stuff, but under Joe Biden's would you say like technically Kamala's not the president, but like she's technically got certain abilities now because is he still technically the president, or do they actually invoke the 25th or whatever it was to like take him out essentially?
Yeah, he's technically still the sitting president, even though he was on vacation in Delaware on a beach this weekend. He's still technically the sitting president, but then you have to ask the question, who's really pulling the strings, regardless of if it's Biden or Harris. There's someone else pulling the strings, but yeah, it's still
Obama.
It's still technically Biden, technically is president right now. So
because the reason why I say that is because this wouldn't be the first time that there has had to have been a decision made to bring people home safe from something, and they made the wrong decision and people died.
Well, you saw what happened when we pulled out of Afghanistan. It was a bloody mess.
That's what I was talking about. Like, he chose to leave those 13 soldiers that unfortunately were killed in action over there. And now we're facing, on a less grand scale, but we're still facing something similar where you're dealing with two people's lives. So hopefully everyone makes the right decision and they bring them home. Because again, that's a cool experience, but I feel like that's like an experience where you're like, okay, I've been up here for 8 days. I think that's enough. Like, let's get home where it's safe on the ground.
Yeah. Speaking of two people's lives, are you aware of the controversy around the Boeing whistleblowers?
I'm not.
Okay. So Boeing, like I mentioned earlier, there's been problems at Boeing that they've been sweeping under the rug for quite a while. And they've had some whistleblowers come out, some internal employees that have come out and said, hey, like, we're aware of these issues, whether they be quality control, rounding off the corners, things like that. The wild thing is some of them conveniently are being found dead after they've testified or before they've testified. So this is from Newsweek, but it says, in the aftermath of Boeing's recent deal with the government over fraud charges related to 2 fatal 737 MAX crashes, the names of 2 high-profile whistleblowers who recently died have resurfaced, with their allegations playing a crucial role in the ongoing scrutiny of the aerospace giant. Joshua Dean and John Barnett, both former employees who raised significant concerns about Boeing's safety practices, died suddenly this year. Dean from a severe bacterial infection, and Barnett from what was ruled as a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Their allegations of manufacturing defects and safety lapses have contributed to continued investigations and ongoing legal actions against Boeing, coming to a head when the door plug of the Alaska Airlines 737 MAX 9 blew off. I don't know if you remember when that happened. There was videos of that, just the door went kablooey. When that happened mid-flight back in January. Since then, over 100 whistleblowers have contacted the Federal Aviation Administration about the company. And the article goes on, but it's just interesting. It could totally be just a little coincidence, but my conspiratorial brain says Boeing is a massive company with a lot to lose. So if you want to find people to no longer be alive, I feel like some of those people have the ability to make people disappear when they need them to disappear.
If you're going to at least say what the people died from, you could at least get a little bit more creative than the whole self-inflicted gunshot wound, because let's be honest, that's been said and that's been done. And anytime any entity comes out and says, oh, such and such who was a whistleblower died from a self-inflicted gun wound, nobody's just going to off themselves like that after blowing the whistle on some of the things that your company's doing that should have put you under a long time ago, or very much so in the red a long time ago. That I don't buy it. And that's just, again, that's my conspiratorial brain going off, but I don't buy that. Now, the bacterial infection, maybe, if he ate anything or, got salmonella or something that was just, awful, I could see that, but I just don't know. So for those of you who are watching, go look up that list of those 100 whistleblowers if their names are actually out there now, and just keep watch on the news for the next several months to see if any of them start falling off or dropping like flies. And if they have been, then, well, something's up.
Kind of on the same topic as this, are you aware of the fun conspiracy around the Clintons' kill list, about all the bodies that have?
Oh yeah, I haven't had like a huge discussion about it, but like I've I know about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like interesting scenarios like this where people that worked for them maybe did them wrong, things like that, where they're found to have, killed themselves by not only hanging themselves, but then shooting themselves in the head with a shotgun. Things like that are very difficult to pull off consistently. Or how, was it they found, was it the Obama's private chef was found floating dead in the back pond of his property.
Yeah.
It's just interesting, the people that pop up deceased around
Right.
the wealthy and powerful that are out there.
Right. Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. But to pivot to some more lighthearted things, we'll just kind of start off, but I don't know for all my gamers out there, if you keep up with any video game related news, Bungie, not too long after they had what could have been probably their biggest release for a DLC expansion, the final shape back in June, has officially laid off 17% of their staff as of this past week. Over 220 employees have been laid off, including, which let me see if I can actually, probably won't be able to have the names of, let's see here, of the two main people, but there were two people. All in all, let me just say, it says another round of layoffs has hit Bungie. Bungie CEO Pete Parsons made the announcement on the studio's website, citing the increase in costs of development and economic conditions as the reason for the reduction of staff. So I watch a few gaming YouTubers, a couple of which have actually gone into detail with some other specific articles. I'm just kind of touching the surface of it. If you want to, do the research yourself, feel free. The YouTuber's name that I watch is Astacross. He's a phenomenal Destiny 2 YouTuber, but he's been covering a lot of news on this, so go check him out. But there's a lot of speculation that there was. So when Sony bought Bungie for I think it was $3.6 billion. Okay. There was enough money to do everything. Granted, they rented out a new space, a larger space to accommodate for the developments and stuff like that. A bunch of their current IPs that they were about to start working on had been scrapped. Like the only one that they're currently working on is called Marathon. But as of now, there have been some changes that are coming to how Bungie is actually going to push its content out starting next year. But be that as it may, though, a lot of these employees have been laid off. So it says a refrain that's become common in the last 2 years of prolific video game industry layoffs. Parsons wrote that 220 roles would be eliminated, representing 17% of the company's workforce. Additionally, Parsons wrote that Bungie was working to integrate another 155 employees into other departments within Sony Interactive Entertainment. These numbers combined with the 100 people laid off in October of last year mean that Bungie has lost roughly 40% of its total workforce in the last 12 months.
Wow.
Bungie had around 1,200 employees last year before 100 people were laid off amid a delay to the big Destiny 2 The Final Shape expansion. So they had people laid off before the expansion, which explains why they had to push the expansion from February to June. Again, I'm okay that they pushed the expansion back. The expansion was amazing. I enjoyed it. Am I playing it a lot right now? Not a whole lot. It's all the episode stuff, but that's neither here nor there. This latest layoff announcement was accompanied by the news that Bungie employees were working on a new game. We are working with the PlayStation Studios leadership to spin out one of our incubation projects, an action game set in a brand new science fantasy universe, to form a new studio within PlayStation Studios to continue its promising development, Parsons wrote. Parsons offered an explanation for all the news, stating that Bungie grew too quickly and spread its leadership team too thin among its many projects. This had a knock-on effect on the studio's known projects, resulting in what Parsons called a quality miss with Destiny 2's Lightfall expansion and the delay of its next game, Marathon. We were overly ambitious. Our financial safety margins were subsequently exceeded, and we began running in the red. Parsons wrote that Bungie will continue to focus on Destiny 2 and Marathon. We still have over 850 team members building Destiny and Marathon. We will continue to build amazing experiences that exceed our players' expectations. So, for someone who's played Destiny pretty much since the launch of Destiny 1, like I didn't overly play it, but I played it. I don't see how Bungie has definitely, they were with Activision. They got bought out by Activision. They left Activision. went out on their own, realized they could not do it. So obviously Sony, bought them out. Well, when they brought up the Lightfall expansion, first off, the Lightfall expansion was not good. It was not great. It was actually pretty awful. There were a lot of people that did buy the final shape. There were a lot of people that enjoyed the final shape, but now with everything that's going on and just kind of like tying up all the loose ends, this happens, and now they're not even really going to be doing. They're not going to be doing the big year expansions like they used to. It's going to be, I think what they said was going to be 2 smaller expansions, but one of them was going to be free. So it's like, I don't exactly know all the details. Again, like I've kind of just watched what I've watched, but there were a lot of things that were unknowns, and now a lot of things are coming to light. But a lot of people have been calling for Pete Parsons to step down as a CEO of Bungie because it seems to be that he's not doing anything to really help the situations at all. 2 of the big developer, I wouldn't say the developers of Bungie, but they were like the community people that would do all the videos and stuff like that. They were pretty much given an ultimatum that was like, you can either go work on this new game Marathon, which is supposed to come out next year. Again, I don't know if I'm going to buy it, but we haven't seen anything on it hardly at all yet. But they were given the ultimatum to go work on that or to leave. And so 2 of the biggest community people have left because of that ultimatum. And so there were a lot of things that happened with Bungie on this. A lot of people were upset about it. Obviously, a lot of people that lost their jobs for just like that for no reason really. I mean, there could have been a way to figure it out, but unfortunately, you got your CEOs that just have billions of dollars lining their pockets instead of paying these people's salaries. You could have been helping that out, but that's neither here nor there.
I think it's a huge mistake to forcefully remove people that are big inside of a community. Like, I don't know who those 2 individuals are, but one thing I do know is a lot of video games can live and die by the community of players that rally around a game or an ecosystem of games. And if you're going to nuke your community, it's almost like a big middle finger to those that are the customers in this case. Like, if you want to bring it down to business terms, those that play the game are your active customers. And I imagine they look at these players and they view them as having a certain dollar value associated with their head because they know they're going to sell DLCs. I imagine Destiny might have like skins you can purchase, things like that. And so to take 2 individuals that are crucial to that community element and then remove them from that, it's almost like you're just admitting we don't want to get money from the current players anymore. And you run a risk at them going to play something else that's not even a Bungie product. There's so many other games out there that vie for attention. And so it's just such a dumb move. It makes sense. Like, I understand why the dumb decision was made, because these are corporate folks that probably don't even play video games themselves. They just sit in a boardroom all day and they're checking boxes, and they love the title and they love that vacation home they just bought. But if you're not taking care of the players, you don't have a product anymore.
That's kind of my just for preference. So the 2 people that I was talking about are these 2 people right here. It was Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy. So these 2 guys have been with Bungie, I want to say since the beginning of Destiny, like before Destiny 2. And they were like, when you had like a Vidoc or something that would come out regarding the game, and they were like, talking about like where the game is heading and showing like scenes from where the game is heading, these would be 2 of those guys. Like, they would head up all that stuff. Like, they were involved heavily in the community. And so it says the past week has been incredibly difficult for Bungie and Destiny 2 fans. The developers and studio staff have faced significant layoffs and restructuring with little understanding of what will happen to Bungie's games. And the bad news just keeps coming. For instance, it was revealed today that 2 of veteran studio members, Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy, are departing. Various sources have reported this, but Jason Schreier, a reporter at Bloomberg, and Jeff Grubb, a reporter at Game Bomb, have provided most of the details. According to their information, they left the studio after Project Payback, a Destiny spinoff that is not Destiny 3, was canceled. It is reported that Payback was canceled in mid-June, and the game's development lasted a little over a year. This was, I give them like the fact that, yes, Bungie was trying to launch a whole bunch of new products. They were trying to do a whole bunch of things at once, and they were stretching themselves too thin, spending a lot of unnecessary resources. I will give them that on that. But it says they were not fired, but left on their own terms. So again, they were given that ultimatum. They were like, you can stay and work on Destiny, or you can leave because we're terminating this project. So it essentially, yeah. So Luke Smith has been working at Bungie since 2007, having worked on Halo 3. Mark Noseworthy joined the studio around 2009, 2010. So this is before Destiny even launched. So they'd been with this franchise for over 10 years. So that, if that tells you anything. But
Yeah, that's a long time.
my biggest issue, and this is funny because it's like I don't play a lot of like big AAA games anymore, like unless it's like very few specific developers, because I know they're always going to create those banging awesome games. But that's my issue, is that people with AAA studios, all they care about is the money. They want to put out amazing trailers, amazing, like, before scenes, like, before the game releases, and then the game releases with all kinds of problems with, then next thing you know, the microtransactions hit and they start charging you for every little thing.
That's the
And
thing I hate the most about games is the microtransactions. Like I get it sometimes, but oh my gosh, it's like spending triple, quadruple the amount of what the initial game itself
right,
costs you, which is already $70 sometimes.
right. And so it's, to me, I just, big AAA studios need to really reevaluate themselves, because they're indie game studios that are putting out really awesome games and charging so little for them when they should be charging at least a little bit more. I'm not saying full $60, $70, but small indie developer studios who are like making little to no money, but yet are putting out, good updates. They're actually involved in the community. They're putting out, community updates for people. Like, they're doing what game developers should be doing. And all these big, like, triple, like Activision for being one. Like, I used to enjoy Call of Duty. Like, let's just talk about it right now. Call of Duty 6 or Black Ops 6 is coming out. Okay. Now I don't know how many Black Ops games you can do where you keep switching, you make it seem like it's different, but it's not. It's the exact same freaking game. Let's just be honest here. You're like, oh my gosh, you changed a couple movement things. Like, it's the same guns, the same almost everything. Well, I haven't bought it. I don't know if I'm going to buy it, because it's just, I'm going to buy this game. I'm going to get on here and I'm going to play it, but there's going to be cheaters. There's going to be like 12-year-old kids who have no life and don't have a job, who are going to get on there and just play all day. Where I'm just trying to get on there and just have a good time and relax and, maybe work on some weapon camos or something. I don't know. But there's just a lot of game studios that definitely need to reevaluate themselves in the gaming industry and quit just being so money hungry. Because if you make a good game, you shouldn't have to worry about the profits, because the profits will come because people are going to buy the good game.
Do you think we'll see a renaissance of indie developers? The one thing I'm thinking of, and this might be a bad example, but I'm thinking of, they're not really an indie developer now, but like I'm looking at games like Fortnite. Now I know Fortnite's been out for like a hot second, but at the time it was very, like, it was an indie game, right? And it kind of took the world by storm. And it was first of all, it was free to play. Now, yes, the game does have microtransactions, but it's all for visual context and content. But I wonder if we're going to see more like indie developers get some credit, get some light shown on them, because people are going to get fed up with these big developers. Like, I always got fed up with, if you look at like EA and EA Sports, the sports games, how they come out every single year.
Right.
You throw so much money into the in-game transactions, but then the content doesn't carry over from game to game. So you're starting over every year, and you're spending hundreds of dollars on basically the same game every year. Like you said, with Call of Duty, very subtle, minor changes with movement and stuff like that, but it's basically the same game.
Yeah, and that's like, I don't know if have you heard of the game called No Man's Sky?
Yes, I've heard about it.
Okay. Prime example, 2014, I think it came out in 2014, they launched. Game was awful. Game was terrible. And they were an indie developer studio, they still are, and they said like, hey, you're right, we flopped on this hard. We did not do our community justice. You know what they did? Every update that they have released has been free. They have not charged for a single update. And let me tell you now, that is probably one of the most fun games that I like, because I picked it up when it came out, but I didn't play it a whole lot because there wasn't a lot to the game at the time. But every so often I'll find myself jumping back on there on the same character, same playthrough, and I'm just having a good time because there's actually a decent amount of progression, and they're actually about to release a 2-parter update. The first part I think just came out or is about to come out. It's about to reshape the entire landscape of that game. But they actually did what they said they were going to do, and they were like, "Hey, yo, we messed up. We dropped the ball. Let's fix this. Let's get back to this." And so a lot of game studios just don't do that. They don't. And so I definitely think there needs to be a heavier push for indie game development. Now, when it comes to game developers, there are a few minute ones that I will 100%, I'm going to support you no matter what. That is From Software. So if you've ever played a Dark Souls game, for any of my for any of my Soulsborne players out there, I will always support a Dark Souls game. They always do good. They always even if I can't beat the game right off the bat, and there's only one that's really holding me back. But Santa Monica Studios with God of War, Guerrilla Games with Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West. And then, I'm trying to think of, there was one more that I had off the top of my head. I just can't remember the game studio.
I've always been a big fan of Rockstar. Now, I know they put out massive AAA games, but Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yes.
Man.
Yes.
Well, also the first one got me pretty heavy in the story, but the second one, chef's kiss. And then GTA 5, I know it's littered with DLC and microtransactions, and I don't play it anymore, but it's a solid game. The fact that that game's still relevant and it came out
2013 is when it came out.
A long time ago.
But so it's there are some game studios that do it right. And I know the funny thing is a lot of the game studios that I listed off all do single player games. They mostly focus your single player games with little to no microtransactions. It's your big AAA developers that develop multiplayer games, online multiplayer games that are oh, we got to have the money. It's no, you don't. Make a banging game and you're good. You don't see Santa Monica Studios putting pay to win stuff in their games. No, they don't, because it's an awesome game. God of War Ragnarok. You want to talk about chef's kiss? That game, oh my gosh, was a chef's kiss. It was amazing. But that's just my opinion on gaming studios. I'll get off my soapbox now, but that's just my opinion about a lot of these gaming development companies.
No, one thing you actually made me think of when you were talking about the Bungie layoffs, the tech industry's been kind of brutal this year in terms of layoffs. So this is a post from a week ago, but it's just showing all the different tech companies and their respective layoffs. So Dell's even laid more people off since this thing came out. So Dell, over 15% of their workforce, Intel 15%, Intuit 10%, PayPal 9%, Unity Software 25%, Twitch 35%, Bumble 30%. Expedia 8%. The list goes on. Riot Games in here, talking about video games, 11%. Oof. Tesla 10%, Pixar 14%, Discord 17%, Match, which is the dating, 6%, Wayfair 13%,
oof,
Duolingo 10%, eBay 9%. So in 2024, tech companies have laid off over 126,000 people so far. And this is from August 6th. So I think some of this is just getting started, but
how's that Build Back Better America going?
Dude, that was the one thing. I know we talked about this before, but that whole Build Back Better nonsense, I always laughed because a lot of people that were in favor of Biden would always give him credit saying look at all the job creation, look at the infrastructure build up, look at all this. And I'm yeah, but do you not realize what we were coming out of? We came out of an economy that completely shut down for a couple of months, which is unheard of. Yeah, absolutely unheard of.
It's unheard of for just being a country that did it, but for the entire world to just stop, nobody was doing anything for. Well, it's probably about 4 months, 3 or 4 months, give or take.
Something like that. Yeah, it was March, April, May, June,
I think
July.
July. I think is when stuff actually kind of started opening back up.
People realized that they weren't going to be bleeding from their eyes and just dying on the streets.
Funny enough, I still see people now, which it could just be because they were probably just sick, but I still see people wearing masks right now, and I'm like, what are you doing? Come on.
Yeah,
now.
I think some of it's cultural now that it's been normalized to a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're just gonna see people like if you get the flu or something, just something normal. Like, I get that.
But I mean, I guess, it is what it is. But I guess to kind of touch off, this is just going to be a quick little topic. But for those of you who are, night sky, astronomy, like you love looking at the stars and the moon, there is a meteor shower happening tonight. It is a Perseid meteor shower. It's supposed to be one of the largest happening, I think, in a hot minute, I'm pretty sure. But it's going to be one of the most visible ones, too. So just keep your eye out for that. I mean, I know most of us will probably be asleep by the time it happens. I know my wife wants to go drive somewhere tonight at 11 o'clock tonight. So I'll definitely ask her if that's still her opinion or not, if she still wants to do that. If not, it's not a big deal. But if you like meteor showers and you like cool stuff like that, go get a look. You should be able to see it if you're in like a darkened area. But go look up some information on it, though, before it hits,
Should I be worried about a meteor hitting Earth?
No. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if it's a sizable one, like, here, I'm coming, Jesus, like, kind of thing. But like I said, I don't think it'll be any like sizable stuff, but it'll just be more so like your big thing just happening. Let's see here.
I remember reading recently, and I was trying to find it on the fly real quick, but I realized it was a hypothetical scenario that NASA ran a simulation to see how would the U.S. respond if an asteroid was headed towards Earth.
I gotta see this. Yeah,
let me see here. Let me pull this up. I just found the first link. It's from NPR. It says asteroid headed towards Earth ? NASA simulation explores how the nation might respond. It says, imagine if scientists discovered a giant asteroid with a 72% chance of hitting Earth in about 14 years. A space rock so big that it could not only take out a city but devastate a whole region. This is a hypothetical scenario that asteroid experts, NASA workers, federal emergency management officials, and their international partners recently discussed as part of a tabletop simulation designed to improve the nation's ability to respond to future asteroid threats, according to a report just released by the space agency. Quote, right now, we don't know of any asteroids of a substantial size that are going to hit the Earth for the next 100 years, says Tarek Daly, the Planetary Defense Section Supervisor at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland. First of all, heck of a job title. If you work at the Planetary Defense Section Supervisor at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland. Man, that's a mouthful. Quote, but we also know, says Daly, that we don't know where most of the asteroids are that are large enough to cause regional devastation. So we don't know what we don't know. Astronomers estimate that there are roughly 25,000 of these near-Earth objects that are 140 meters across or larger, but only about 43% have been found to date, according to materials prepared for the tabletop exercise held in April in Laurel, Maryland. This event was just the latest in a series of drills that planetary defense experts have held every couple of years to practice how they'd handle news of a potentially planet-menacing asteroid. And it's the first since NASA's DART mission, which showed that ramming a spacecraft into an asteroid could change its path through space. This time around, just after the fictional asteroid's discovery, scientists estimated its size to be anywhere from 60 meters to almost 800 meters across. Even an asteroid on the smaller end of that range could have a big impact, depending on where it hit the Earth, says Lindley Johnson, NASA's Planetary Defense Officer Emeritus. While a, quote, 60-meter asteroid impacting somewhere in the middle of the ocean wouldn't be a real problem, he says, the same asteroid hitting land near a metropolitan area would be a serious situation. Yeah, no kidding. Because telescopes would see such an asteroid as just a point of light in space, says Daly, quote, we're going to have a very large uncertainties in the asteroid's properties, and that leads to very large uncertainties in what the consequences would be if it were to hit the ground, as well as large uncertainties in what it would take to stop that asteroid from hitting the ground. The article goes on, but I don't know. NASA's kind of working through this. It says, what's more, this particular scenario unnervingly stipulated that scientists wouldn't be able to learn more about this threat for more than 6 months, when telescopes could spot the asteroid again and do another assessment of its trajectory. Exercise participants discussed 3 options: simply waiting and doing nothing until those next telescope observations, starting a US-led space mission to have a spacecraft fly by the asteroid to get more information, or creating an effort to build a more expensive spacecraft that could be capable of spending time around the asteroid and possibly even changing its path through space. Unlike previous asteroid threat simulations, this one did not play out to a dramatic ending. Quote, we actually stayed stuck in one moment in time for the duration of the exercise. We didn't fast forward, says Daly. As a result, attendees had plenty of time to discuss how to communicate both the uncertainties and the urgent need to act. They also discussed how funding and other practical considerations might play into the decision-making process in federal agencies and Congress. Daly says in previous discussions, technical experts tended to assume that access to funding wouldn't be an issue in such an unprecedented situation. Could you imagine if that was the problem? Like, hey, we have an asteroid, it's coming, we know it's going to hit, but Congress doesn't want to pass a budget, and so there's no money to do anything for this. NASA's report on the exercise notes that many stakeholders expressed they would want as much information about the asteroid as soon as possible, but expressed skepticism that funding would be forthcoming to obtain such information without more definitive knowledge of the risk. In the meantime, NASA's on track to launch a new asteroid finding telescope in the fall of 2027. If we can't get our astronauts back, I don't know if that's even a priority at that point. But it says, quote, we've got to discover what's out there, determine their orbits, and then determine whether they represent an impact hazard to the Earth over time. So at least they're kind of thinking about it, but it seems like there isn't a consensus as to what would happen.
But realistically, what are the chances? You know, like, that's all I'm saying.
I don't know.
How in the past, like, let's just say the past, like, 5 to 10 years, how many things have you seen come out where they're like, Meteor is supposed to, you know, on the verge of possibly impacting Earth, you know, like it could cause, you know, widespread devastation, goes right by us. I'm not saying it's not possible, but
yeah, no, I think that's the problem sometimes is humans, we have a very short lifespan, like in the grand scheme of things. Like we live nowadays, like 100 years, couple decades, 100 years back.
If you're healthy 100%, you know.
Yeah, so to us, you know, if something only happens every, I don't know, million years, we're like, I'm not concerned about that. But when was the last time we got hit by a really big asteroid or meteor or something? It's been a while, right?
It has been a while.
Yeah, and think about last week. Was it last week when I brought up that gravitational anomaly that they've kind of recently found in Antarctica,
right?
Where they think that an asteroid that is many times over bigger than what wiped out the dinosaurs, which is off the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Mm-hmm. So, like, we know these things do hit us. It's just how often. My main concern is as long as we're looking up there and we have a little bit of a heads up, I mean, it is what it is. What concerns me, though, is that we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, because, I mean, we're just people. You know, we're not the ones that are, you know, at the, what was it called? The planetary supervisor at the John Hopkins something.
Yeah, the Planetary Defense Section Supervisor at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory.
Yeah, we're not that guy.
Yeah, we're not him, thankfully.
Yeah. So it's like you know, and here's the thing, like, I'll be honest, this is probably one of the things that sucks most about being just like, I don't want to say a regular person, but like a civilian, you know, because how do we know that what they're telling us is actually the truth? You know, again, it's just with everything you see on social media and everything you see on the news, like, how do we know that that's actually what's happening? Because you know how news outlets, they'll get this story and then they spin it all out of control to get the ratings up and stuff like that, because that's what they're trying to do.
You make a good point. So the whole trust thing, I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, and the idea of trust being a premium on products is at an all-time high, meaning that only the companies that are truly trusted. Now, when I say company, that could be Unscripted Company, that could be Coca-Cola, that could be Microsoft Computers, whatever that may be. Things that people are paying, whether that be attention, time, monetary, like the dollar, things like that, ever since the events of 2020, because people are just not as trusting as they used to be, because a lot of people used to blindly trust a lot of things. And we've come to find out that a lot of things that you should theoretically be able to blindly trust, like at face value, you should be able to blindly trust the US government to do what it needs to do. But we've learned that that's not always the case.
That is not always the case.
So people are, putting a premium to the trustworthiness of things, which is why if someone's still watching right now, first of all, hello, pleasure having you along with us. Definitely appreciate you hanging out with us. Hopefully you can trust us. We'll tell you when we know what we don't know. But while I have your attention real quick, if you haven't already, somewhere on this page, whether it's Spotify, Rumble, YouTube, somewhere else on the internet that we might be in the future, there's probably a subscribe button or a follow button. It's somewhere probably on the bottom of the page. If you haven't clicked that yet, do us a solid. Give us a follow, give us a subscribe, like the episode. Leave us a comment also, because we love interacting with you. I see some of you regular commenters out there. I appreciate you. I see you. But yeah, sorry. I feel like you were going to say something and I went down that rabbit hole.
No. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, it does fall down to trust. And, to kind of reiterate what you said, yes, not just the shameless plug, but we don't talk about things that, we're going to talk about stuff, but we will tell you like, hey, we don't know this for sure. We don't know what we're talking about. This is just what we're reading off of an article. We're just kind of making our own baseline things. Like we're kind of like your unofficial news source, but we also just like having a good time and just, developing our own fun little theories. So again, as my co-host here said, just, if there's any questions that you guys have or any topics that you guys want us to cover, again, we're just here to just have a good time and talk about some interesting topics. We try to keep it current event-ish. We've been trying to stray away from political because that's just been a lot of talk as of late, but it's been difficult. But that's why we have our fun little conspiracy theory talks and some, other relevant topics in today's society, or just even just fun topics. So, again, if you like those, again, give us a like, give us a follow, and leave us some comments.
Yeah. One more quick plug, and then Riley, I'm going to throw it over to you for some wise words of wisdom. We do have our live stream. That's going to be for our 30th episode. That's going to be August 25th. It's a Sunday. Come check us out. We'll be live on Rumble, potentially elsewhere as well. But just like last time, if you tune in for the 25th episode, we'll be doing that again for the 30th. But until next time, I will leave the last words to the wisest person on this podcast. Riley, take us home.
Also, don't forget to check out our merch. Again, it's not necessary, but we do appreciate the support anyhow for whatever it is that you may see fit. What would you do if a meteor was going to impact Earth? What would be your last moments? How would you handle that? What would you do? At the end of the day, would you go into space? If you had the opportunity to go into space, JK, would you go into space? Like, even if it was just for a couple of days, but you didn't know if anything was going to happen. Ask yourselves those questions. And again, just be kind. I said that at the beginning of the podcast. So be kind to everyone. Hatred gets you nowhere. And again, we're all just trying to live our best lives and just have a good time. So that's pretty much what I got. And we'll see you guys in the next one.